Well, meantime, a new poll shows that confidence in the Supreme Court is at a historic low. 25% of Americans, 25%, say they have trust in the court. That is down 36% from last year. The poll also looked at how much Democrats and Republicans trust the court. Only 13% of Democrats have confidence, while 39% of Republicans say they trust the Supreme Court. So joining us now to discuss the integrity of the Supreme Court, our political editor, Chris Steyerwalt. Chris, thanks for being here. What can the justices do at this point to gain back America's trust?
Well, they can do their job quietly. They can do their job in a way that does not appear designed to curry favor with one side or the other, and they can work together well. We have to remember in the United States, the job of the Supreme Court is not to be popular. The job of the Supreme Court is to make sure that the laws of the land are constitutional and that due process is followed for the citizens of the United States. Just because something is popular or unpopular, that's a matter for Congress to take up. What we've suffered with in the United States, if you think about it this way, these low ratings are kind of a result of this. As Congress is not able to do its job, the executive and judicial branches are under different pressure and feel more opportunity maybe to exert more power in the system. But the problem is that's not what they're there to do, right? They can't really do Congress's job. So while it's true that Supreme Court's, the public confidence in the Supreme Court is down, it dropped among Republicans after the 2020 election, and they affirmed Joe Biden's presidency, and now it's down sharply among Democrats since the leaked memo. But the truth is, in the end, it's not the Supreme Court's job to be popular. It's the Supreme Court's job to be right.
All right, so not the court's job to be popular. Important to remember that. But Chris, let's talk about trust within the high court. How concerned are they about the possibility of even more of these leaks?
Chief Justice John Roberts has worked really hard over time to create and foster an atmosphere on that court of trust and collegiality that really hadn't been there. Justice Antonin Scalia, the late Justice Antonin Scalia, and the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had been sort of the nucleus of an effort to restore comity and collegiality on the court. Roberts has expanded on that to try to get the court back to a place where the justices could talk to each other, deal with each other, and have a common culture. Obviously, this has been devastating. Obviously, the leak has been incredibly harmful for efforts to have that comity and trust. We don't know how the investigation is going to turn out, but it is crucial for the Supreme Court to get to the bottom of this. It's not the first time that there's ever been a leak on a big case in American history, but the timing of this and the seeming intent to sow chaos and to sow division means that this is a crucially important thing for the court to figure out.
Yeah, and important to remember that investigation is currently going on. Chris, you mentioned the relationship between Justices Scalia and Ginsburg. Is there any type of camaraderie right now that exists with any of the current justices?
Yes, I think there is. I think that there are obviously going to be strained feelings and there's tension and there's all of that stuff. But I think that we see in Elena Kagan, particularly on the Democratic side, we know about Roberts, we know about Kavanaugh, we know about others who want to create a common space for discussion because we still see some interesting decisions, right? Now, in this case, things lined up in an ideological way, but still they're capable of surprises. And the Supreme Court, to go back to the original question about confidence, what makes the court effective and what makes the court well esteemed by the people of the United States who are there to serve is when all of their results are not predictable and all of their results do not seem to break on partisan lines, or that they are independent, free thinkers who aren't just doing one party's business or another. That's really important. And that sort of starts with the comity and the willingness of the justices to work together to render decisions that are satisfying to more than just one sliver of the electorate.
Yeah, absolutely makes a difference there. All right, Chris Steyerwalt, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.